Good afternoon, students. Welcome back to online biology bridge course classes. In previous classes, we have well studied about how the nervous system with the different types of nerves are helping in different types of functions a body is performing in day-to-day life. We have studied about how the signal or an impulse is being sent from one part of the neuron to another type of the neuron or to the successive neuron. We have also studied about their major involuntary action, which we stated it as reflex action. Taking an example of a person holding a pan which is hot. In today's classes, let us study about the different types of nervous system that is present in human being, along with which we'll also deal with the structure of the human brain and about the endocrine system to maintain as well as to coordinate the different types of functions that are performed by an individual. Let us go first for the types of nervous system. There are two different types of nervous systems which we come across. The first one being central nervous system. Central nervous system, that is CNS. Central nervous system is formed by the group of neurons that are present within two structures. One is brain and the another one is spinal cord. So we can write it as is composed of neurons formed within brain and spinal cord. Second one is peripheral nervous system. That is PNS. Peripheral nervous system is composed of neurons that are connecting to different parts in the body. So the group of nerves that are present within the brain and spinal cord, we constitute that as the central nervous system. The major coordinating system of the nervous system is central nervous system. Central nervous system is the one which receives the stimulus from the sensory neurons and processes the stimulus in terms of information and transmits or sends the signal to any part of the body that has to be responded. So the processing unit within the nervous system is constituted by central nervous system. Whereas coming to peripheral nervous system, these peripheral nervous system either they can be connected to the skeletal muscles or they can also be connected to the smooth muscles within the body. Based on that, if the peripheral nervous system is connected to the skeletal muscles and they are helping in contraction of the skeletal muscles resulting in movement of any part of the body, then we call it as voluntary action, that is based on our will. Whereas there is also another one terminology called as involuntary action, wherein without our consciousness there will be movement of the muscular structures that are taking place within the body. So two categories we can identify in case of peripheral nervous system. Majorly to say, brain and spinal cord nerves constitute central nervous system, whereas nerves that are connected from brain throughout all the parts of the body constitute the peripheral nervous system. Now, these actions that we have stated, they can be either voluntary, voluntary action. Voluntary action refers to movement by consciousness. If there is movement of any part of the body by our will, that is, if we decide to move the hand, to move the leg, to move the head in right or left portion based on our decision, then such a type of action is called as a voluntary action. These voluntary actions include contraction of the skeletal muscles, whereas there is also another type of action called as involuntary action. Involuntary action refers to movement of internal body parts without our consciousness. We need to say that involuntary action is taken up due to contraction of the smooth muscles. The smooth muscles that lie in the digestive system, respiratory system, or else in the reproductive system, they undergo contraction without our consciousness or without our decision. For example, if we need to say, digestion of the food that we have intaken takes place without our decision, and even the process of respiration takes place, that is inhalation occurs even without our decision. Rate of the heartbeat can also increase. The rate of the food being digested can also increase without our will. So all these are controlled by some type of the actions which are not under our control. Such actions are termed as involuntary action. Simply to say, voluntary actions are taken up by skeletal muscles. They are by skeletal muscles, whereas involuntary action is taken up by smooth muscles. So these are the two different types of actions that can be observed in case of human nervous system. Now let us learn about where and how the different parts within the brain is controlling these type of both the voluntary as well as the involuntary actions. Human brain is the major organ for a major organ for coordinating system, for coordinating system, because brain is the actual center wherein the stimulus being received by the sensory neuron is accepted within the brain, processed in terms of information, and then the signal is being sent to different parts of the body wherever the response has to be given. So this coordination between receiving and sending and the process of being responding to the stimulus that is received from the surrounding is all done well by the help of human brain. So we term it as human brain is a major organ for the coordinating system. Human brain is well protected, well protected within a bony cavity which is termed as skull, which is termed as skull. So skull is the major bony cavity. Skull is the bony cavity that covers the brain. The bony cavity within which the brain is well protected, such a structure we name it as skull. So the brain is also containing a special fluid. This skull is filled with fluid called cerebrospinal fluid. It is CSF. A fluid called cerebrospinal fluid completely covers up the brain within the skull, and it acts as a shock absorber. Acts as shock absorber. It well protects the brain from any sudden situations. Okay, so that is what the function of fluid, that is cerebrospinal fluid. Coming to the parts of the human brain, the human brain is divided into three parts: forebrain, midbrain, and the last region called as hindbrain. First one is forebrain. Forebrain is formed by three structures. First one is cerebrum. Second one is thalamus. And third one is hypothalamus. Let us look into these structures within the diagram. So the uppermost part, which are containing the prominent foldings, these foldings are constituting the first part, that is cerebrum. Second part, that is second part, that is thalamus, and third part, that is hypothalamus. All three together, cerebrum, thalamus, hypothalamus, three togetherly, they are constituting the forebrain. When we see the structure within the cerebrum is the region which is containing three different types of the areas within it. Cerebrum has three areas within it. First one is sensory area. So sensory area, if we look into sensory area, is made up of the sensory neurons. Sensory neurons. Sensory neurons refers to the ones which receive the stimulus from any part of the body and send the stimulus to the central nervous system. So sensory area are made up of group of sensory neurons which have the ability to receive the stimulus from any part of the body and give it to central nervous system. And the cerebrum also contains the second type of region called as association area. Association area is made up of different types of neurons which can be termed as interneurons. These interneurons, the major function that interneurons are performing is they are involved in intersensory communication. Involving in intersensory communication. It means whenever there is any two stimuli being received, two different types of the stimuli being received by the body, then both the sensory neurons that are carrying two different types of the stimuli reaches the central nervous system at the point of association area, wherein the new interneuron is going to connect both the sensory neurons in the form of a particular processing takes place, and it in turns give the signal to the respective motor neurons what response has to be given. So that is what it is acting as intersensory communication it is helping for. And the third one is it is motor area, made up of motor neurons. Motor neurons are the type of the neurons which are present within the central nervous system, and these motor neurons send the signal which is processed to from central nervous system to the any part of the body which has to give the response. So in case of cerebrum we can constitute three regions. One is the sensory area, association area, and the motor area. The sensory area that contains the sensory neurons receives the stimulus, and this stimulus is sent to the association area, wherein the interneuron processes the stimulus being accepted or received and sends this information or signal to the motor neuron that it has to perform the function in terms of response by any part of the body. So this is what we can see in case of cerebrum. Some types of the voluntary actions. Some type of voluntary actions such as sensing the touch, hearing, or audition, olfaction, or smelling, or gustation, or tasting, gustation, or simply to say tasting, all are these functionings that a human is able to. If we are able to sense the touch, if we are able to hear the noise, if we are able to smell the food or any object, if we are able to see something, if we are able to taste a dish, then it is all due to the centers that are present in the cerebrum. Coming to the next part, that is thalamus and hypothalamus. Thalamus and hypothalamus togetherly they constitute a structure called as thalamus and hypothalamus. Togetherly, it constitutes diencephalon. Togetherly constitute diencephalon. In this, thalamus is the major part of coordinator. Thalamus is the major part within the forebrain which is going to coordinate the functions that have to be performed whenever the motor neurons are sending the signal to any part of the body. That coordination between the sensory and motor and to the peripheral nervous system is taken up by the thalamus region of the brain. Coming to the hypothalamus, hypothalamus is made up of large number of neuro secretory cells. These neurosecretory cells secretes some chemical compounds which we can name them as hormones. And these hormones are responsible for wide type of the functions or wide type of the reactions that can be observed within the body for maintenance of the body temperature, for the urge to eat, urge to thirst are all controlled by the help of hormones that are secreted by the hypothalamus. So this is what three different parts we can see in case of forebrain. The first part is cerebrum, where all the voluntary actions that we are doing, especially the presence of this an ability of an human being to see, to smell, to hear, to sense the touch, and to taste the food, all are controlled by the different types of centers that are present within the cerebrum. And thalamus is maintaining in coordinating the actions between the central nervous system with the peripheral nervous system, and hypothalamus is helping in to perform or to maintain the temperature of the body or to urge of the hunger as well as thirst will be maintained by hormones that are secreted by the hypothalamus. Next part of the human brain is midbrain. This constitute midbrain. The midbrain is the part, it is between thalamus or hypothalamus, hypothalamus of forebrain and pons of hindbrain. So here we can see a canal like structures which is being passed out. So this canal like structure beginning from here we term it as midbrain. So midbrain is the part between thalamus or hypothalamus of the forebrain and pons region of the hindbrain. So this is what we can see about midbrain. Connecting to this, the next part is hindbrain. Hindbrain contains again three different parts. One is the bulged portion called as pons, medulla oblongata, and the another convoluted region called as cerebellum. So three structures we can observe in case of hindbrain. First part of the hindbrain is pons, the bulged portion. This is pons. Pons is the region where the any type of the neuron, that can be a sensory neuron, interneuron, or the motor neuron, or any type of the neuron from the cerebrum region can be connected at a point called as pons. So pons is the place for coordination between neurons. Next structure of the hindbrain is medulla oblongata. Medulla oblongata. Medulla oblongata contains different types of centers. A center for vomit, center for increasing the breathing rate, center for salivation, or center for increasing blood pressure, for increasing blood pressure. So these are the different types of centers that we can observe in case of the structure called as medulla oblongata. These structures that are present in medulla oblongata, they are directly connected to the respective parts. For example, if there is any urge of the vomiting, then the center of vomit that is present within the medulla oblongata will be activated. The neurons connected to the vomit center send the signal to the stomach region and facilitate or help in vomiting of the contents that are present within the stomach through the mouth. So this is how the process of vomiting takes place, by the help of center present in the medulla oblongata. There is also a center for breathing. If the rate of breathing by an individual at the time of athletic condition or any other sports has to be increased, then that rate of respiration or breathing can be increased by activating the center of the breathing that is present in case of medulla oblongata. Along with which, the center for salivation refers to mouth watering, which we generally say whenever we observe or think about a dish that is favorite to us, the mouth waters. So that ability of the salivary glands to secrete the saliva either by thinking or by seeing or by smelling is done by neurons that are present within the center of salivation present in the medulla oblongata. Or the center for blood pressure increase can also be done, since the heart rate increasing center is also present in case of medulla oblongata, because the peripheral nervous stimulation or the peripheral nervous system begins with the medulla oblongata part. So here in case of medulla oblongata, we can observe that centers that are present in the medulla oblongata regulates, increases the vomiting or regulates the vomiting, breathing rate, salivation rate, as well as increases the blood pressure in an individual based on the situation what the body needs. So this is what the function of medulla oblongata we can look into. The next part, the third part of the hindbrain is cerebellum. So this is the convoluted refers to coiled structure. So cerebellum is a coiled structure and the part of the hindbrain. This cerebellum structure is responsible for maintenance of maintenance of posture of head with that of the body. Whenever we do different types of actions, either that can be bending or that can be turning, to any different activities that we do in day to day life, the positioning of the head should be well balanced with the position of axis of the body, so that maintenance of the head postures with that of the body is done by the help of the last portion of the hindbrain, that is cerebellum. So these are the different types or the parts of the human brain: forebrain, midbrain, hindbrain, that we can observe. Connected to the brain part, the next region that we see is the group of nerve fibers constituting the structure called as spinal cord. Constituting the structure called as spinal cord. So we have seen yesterday how well the reflex action that has been taken by the receiving of the stimulus through the sensory neuron was connected by the relay neuron in the spinal cord, because spinal cord is the actual site where neurons from the central nervous system, neurons from all the parts of the body gets connected to form the reflex arc. So spinal cord is helping in all such functions. Spinal cord refers to a group of nerve tracts. Okay, so this is what we could have studied. We have studied about the human brain structure, different parts, and each part functioning that we have studied. So all this was about the nervous system. In case of nervous system, we have well understood that about the nerve or a particularly neuron, how the neuron is sending the stimulus or the signal, how the neuron is receiving the stimulus, how it is being processed within different centers of the brain, and how all parts of the brain are helping us in thinking, writing, talking, sensing, tasting, and all different functions that we perform in day to day life. In association to the nervous system, we can also observe a major type of another system within the human body, that is endocrine system. That is endocrine system. As the neuron cannot be penetrated into each and every part of the cell, there are some connections which have not been done. So, such connections or the communication between two adjacent cells within a particular tissue can be easily done by some chemical compounds that are being secreted over there in the local format only. So, such system which involves the communication not in the form of a signal in terms of electrical impulse, but in terms of chemical compounds, we term it as endocrine system. Here the word endo is referring for within, crine refers to secretion. So there is secretion of the chemical compounds by certain glands or the organs directly into the bloodstream. Such a system which comprises the group of glands, their secretions being directly put up into the bloodstream, we call it as endocrine system. Let us look into the different types of endocrine glands that are present in case of human being. Endocrine glands. Endocrine glands secrete the chemical compounds, the chemical compounds which are termed as hormones. into blood streams. These endocrine glands are generally termed as ductless glands because they lack the tubular structures called as ducts. So the endocrine glands which do not contain the tubular structures called ducts will be generally termed as ductless glands. As the duct is not present, they are going to secrete the chemical compounds, so called hormones, directly into the bloodstream. These hormones we can define it as hormones are the non-nutrient non-nutrient chemical compounds being secreted in trace amount and act as intercellular messengers. Intercellular messengers. So this is the definition for hormones. Here we can observe three major words. One is non-nutrient, trace amount, and the another one is intercellular messengers. Let us look into what these words are trying to tell us. So we can see that they are non-nutrients. They are not providing any energy to the body. So we call hormones as non-nutrients. And what they are the chemical compounds. And how these are being secreted? These are being secreted in a very trace amount. The word trace is saying about very less quantity, very less amount. They are produced in very less concentration. And how, what is the function they are going to perform? Their function is they are acting as intercellular messenger. The word inter is saying about between. Cellular means cell. Between two cells, these hormones or the chemical compounds which are being produced in very less amount, they are acting as the messengers to send the signal from one cell to the another cell. What a particular cell has to do. For example, in a given tissue, if we consider a cell A, cell B. If a cell A produces a hormone, then that hormone can reach the cell B and can stimulate or tell the B cell what the function it has to do. So this functioning is done by the hormones. Let us look into different types of the endocrine glands that are present in case of human endocrine system and also their functions. First one is, before getting into the major pituitary gland or an endocrine gland, let us look about a major gland that is regulating or acting as a head in order to control about which hormone has to be secreted at what time and what function has to be done by that hormone. So that such a major organ who is controlling is hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is major regulator within the endocrine system. So this hypothalamus, which is the part of forebrain. We have seen just now that it is containing group of neurons which have the ability of secreting the hormones. So the hormones that are secreted by the hypothalamus, reaches the gland called as pituitary gland, reaches the pituitary gland. Pituitary gland is the one which is present just below the hypothalamus. So once the hypothalamic hormone released by the pituitary gland, so it stimulates or it tells the pituitary gland either to secrete its hormone or to stop secreting that the hormone that has been continuing secreting till now. So that is what the function being done by the hypothalamic hormone. Taking an example, somatostatin, it is the hormone somatostatin secreted by hypothalamus. So this somatostatin hormone inhibits or stops the secretion of growth hormone, secretion of growth hormone by the gland called as pituitary gland. That is pituitary gland. So this is one example to say how the hormones secreted by the hypothalamus will act on the hormones that are being released by the pituitary gland. Usually the anterior pituitary gland, the first part of the pituitary gland, has an ability to secretion of the human growth hormone, but when hypothalamus secretes the hormone called as somatostatin, this somatostatin hormone reaches the pituitary gland and tells the pituitary gland not to secrete more concentration of growth hormone. This is how the signal is being sent by the hormone within the particular region of the body. Next part, the major endocrine glands we can observe in case of human beings are: first endocrine gland is pituitary gland. Pituitary gland. So pituitary gland, taking an example, pituitary gland is located below hypothalamus. That is, if this was thalamus, this is hypothalamus, and just below this there is presence of the structure called as pituitary gland. Pituitary gland. This is thalamus, this is hypothalamus, and the part present just below the hypothalamus is pituitary gland. So pituitary gland can secrete different types of hormones. Let us take an example of it. One example of the hormone secreted by the pituitary gland is human growth hormone. Human growth hormone. The function of the growth hormone is to go and bind on the different types of the cells, either that can be the bone cells, muscle cells, so that there can be increase in the height of an individual or increase in the girth of an individual during the time of development. So this is what the function we can see. So function of growth hormone is increase in size of an individual. But if there is more or very less secretion of this growth hormone in the developing children, we can see some diseases or disorder conditions. For example, disorder of disorders. First one, in developing child, in children, if there is less secretion of growth hormone, if there is less secretion of growth hormone, then that condition of very less concentration of growth hormone within the body will leads to a disorder called as pituitary dwarfism. Pituitary dwarfism, where an individual or the child will be very short heighted, where an individual will be very short heighted. So that is what one disorder connected to growth hormone. In case if there is more secretion of growth hormone, then this more secretion of growth hormone will lead to another disorder termed as gigantism. Gigantism is a condition where a person will be too much heighted compared to that of the normal individuals. So these are the two different disorders that we can observe. Pituitary gland, taking as an example, located just below the hypothalamus. If growth hormone is secreted by the pituitary gland, that helps in increase in the size of an individual. If there is very less secretion of the growth hormone in growing children, it leads to a disorder called as pituitary dwarfism, where the dwarf word refers to short. So the individual or a particular child will be very short heighted. If there is more secretion of the growth hormone, then it leads to another disorder called as gigantism, where an individual or a child will be very tall in condition. Next gland is pineal gland. Pineal gland is generally termed as the third eye present at the dorsal part of the forebrain. So, this pineal gland is responsible for secretion of the hormone called as melatonin. Pineal gland is responsible for secretion of the hormone called as melatonin. Melatonin performs various functions within our body, which can be generally termed as sleep wake cycle. So melatonin helps in maintaining sleep wake cycle. So the cycle which is maintained by an individual to sleep at the time of 9 p.m., get up at the time of 6 a.m. in the morning, well regulated with different types of the physiological activities that can be digestion, respiration, pumping of the blood by the heart, or excretion or filtration of the blood by the kidneys or the nephrons during the night time, or the sleeping condition, increase in the body temperature, alertness within an individual, all can be well regulated for every 24 hours in an individual by secretion of the hormone called as melatonin by the endocrine gland called as pineal gland. Next one is thyroid gland. Thyroid gland Thyroid gland is present at the neck region, just about the above the beside the two regions of the trachea. So if we observe the thyroid gland, it is just a bilobed structure. It is a bilobed structure containing two lobes. So this bilobed structure thyroid gland is secreting two types of hormones. One is T3, that is triiodothyronine, thyronin. And another one is T4, that is tetraiodothyronin. This is also called as thyroxine. So here we can observe one terminology, that is iodo. Here the word iodo is referring for iodine molecule. In the diet that we intake or the food that we intake should be quite rich with the iodine molecules, so that if iodine molecules are available for the thyroid gland, then the thyroid gland can easily synthesize two hormones. One is triiodothyronin, whereas tri refers to three, requires three iodine molecules for the synthesis of T3 hormone, and another one hormone called as tetraiodothyronin or thyroxine, which requires four iodine molecules to form the T4 hormone. Togetherly, they are called as thyroid hormones. Togetherly, they are called as thyroid hormones. So here we can observe that T3 as well as T4 for their synthesis require iodine molecule. So whenever we intake the food, we should be quite aware that it would be quite rich with the iodine molecules. So there are major functions that are being performed by the T3 and T4. So let us look into function of T3 and T4 molecules. They are helpful in metabolism of carbohydrate, lipid, as well as proteins. The formation or the breakdown, either of the two, can be well maintained or regulated by the help of T3 and T4. The breakdown of the carbohydrates, the breakdown of the lipids, breakdown of the protein, all can be well maintained within the body by the help of two hormones. One is T3 and the another one is T4 hormones. If there is very less secretion of T3 and T4 hormones, then it leads to a condition called as goiter, that is swelling of thyroid gland. Swelling of thyroid gland. The very less secretion of T3 and T4 hormone within the thyroid gland results in enlargement. Here the word swelling refers to enlargement or the abnormal growth. The abnormal growth of the thyroid gland due to less secretion of the T3 T4 hormones is called as goiter. So goiter is one of the disorder condition related to the thyroid gland. Coming to the next endocrine gland, that is adrenal gland. Adrenal gland is divided into two different regions, the outer region called as cortex, and the inner region called as medulla. Here we can observe that a pair of adrenal glands are present. A pair of adrenal glands are present. These pair of adrenal glands are present within an each individual. We can observe that one adrenal gland is located above the kidney, above or on top of each kidney. On top of each kidney, we can observe one adrenal gland is located. So, adrenal gland is divided into two regions, the outer region called as cortex and inner region called as medulla. Outer region cortex here secretes different types of hormones like cortisol, aldosterone, etc. Aldosterone, cortisol, etc. If we see, cortisol is responsible for synthesis of glucose, synthesis of glucose. It is responsible for synthesis of glucose, breakdown of lipid, as well as for breakdown of proteins. So this is what the function is performed by the hormone cortisol secreted by the cortex region in the adrenal gland. There is also another one hormone called as aldosterone. This aldosterone hormone helps in reabsorption of the sodium and water molecules. If in some conditions wherein the more concentration of more volume of the water is being excreted out from the body in the form of urine, then the body will be under dehydrated condition. To prevent the dehydrated condition, water has to be retained or be conserved within the body. That conservation is done by reabsorption of sodium as well as water from the urine or the filtrate which is being excreted through the nephron. So that functioning is done by the aldosterone hormone. Another hormones are secreted by the medulla, that is epinephrine, and another one is norepinephrine. Togetherly, epinephrine and norepinephrine are termed as emergency hormones. Togetherly, they are termed as emergency hormones because epinephrine and norepinephrine are secreted by the adrenal medulla region only at the time of stress condition or emergency condition. Let us take an example of a scary situation where we see a snake suddenly or tiger or a lion suddenly. Then we show some different types of actions on our facial expressions and within our body. For example, there can be a pupillary dilation, that is enlarging the eyeballs and being scary in a being scary condition, or there can be even the condition of piloerection, that is piloerection refers to the straightening of the hairs, which we generally term it as goosebumps, or there can also be more sweating due to a riding condition. It can be more sweating, or it can also be more respiration rate, or more heartbeats, or heartbeat conditions will be increased. More number of heartbeats can be observed per minute whenever a person is under scary or a stress condition. So these all are the different types of the effects which we can observe whenever we are under emergency condition. The increase in the heart rate, increase in the respiration rate, sweating, erection of the hairs or straightening of the hairs, expansion or enlargement of the eyeballs under scary condition, and sweatingness. These all are the different types of effects that we can observe in a person when he is under scary condition due to two hormones, one is epinephrine, another one is norepinephrine, being secreted by the adrenal medulla. So this is another endocrine gland. So this is how we have looked into different types of the endocrine glands. Rest with two to three endocrine glands are left out to study. So in the upcoming classes, let us go through another two endocrine glands which you can study. Thank you.